I really believed that it was going to be a big deal. And I think when I spoke to people, I didn't hide behind my business plan. My business plan actually said on the front of it, says, "You want to make God laugh, show him your business plan." And they said, "You can't show that to the bank." And the bank said, "Well, actually, it's very realistic. We quite like it."
Hello and welcome back to The Businessmen. I'm your host, Ben Shepherd. Joel Dummett is off on paternity leave with his newborn son and his hands full of nappies and everything in between. We are both committed as ever to launching our own men's skincare brand. It's getting closer, lovingly named by you as Foreskin. To catch up on the full story, do subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. You can watch episodes on YouTube, so subscribe there too. We have, of course, been speaking to fascinating people in the world of business, asking them all about their failures and their successes. And by the way, today is no exception. I'm joined by the powerhouse that is Simon Woodroffe, entrepreneur, maverick, and the original Yo Man, which also happens to be the title of his brilliant new book. It is a wild, honest, and brilliantly human autobiography, charting his journey from being nearly broke in his early 40s after business failures and divorce, wondering if it ever amount to anything, to building one of the most iconic and disruptive brands in British culture, Yo Sushi. A story of grit, reinvention, and audacious imagination, just like the man himself. Simon, thank you for joining me on The Businessmen. It's a real honour to have you in the studio, having listened to the audiobook of your autobiography over the weekend. I've been gripped. You've had quite the adventure. Would that be a good way of describing it?
Yep, it's a rollicking story, Yo Man is, and it didn't always feel like a rollicking story at the time, as you know.
Yeah.
But it was, and I look back on it, and it was quite a life.
The headlines, of course, that everybody will be able to understand is what you created with Yo Sushi, with the Yo brand that has just become a global phenomenon. But the journey to get there is absolutely fascinating. Who were you before Yo Sushi?
Well, I was a boy that struggled at home and struggled at school and ended up going to boarding school when I was 7. You know, there was no moans, but I did, and left Marlborough College, the famous Marlborough College, privileged education, when I was 16. And into the Sgt. Pepper's had just come out. The Doors album had just been released. The world suddenly was colourful. And that's what I did. And when I look back, I'm quite proud of the boy that had the courage to do that.
The adventure that you went on post-school, and school that was tough. I mean, school that these days, you know, there was criminal activity going on at school on the part of some of the teachers that you had to deal with and you grew up with. And I guess you kind of all grew up thinking it was normal.
It was normal. I remember years later we told my mother, you know, in the 50s they didn't talk about stuff like that. I remember we said to my mother that what had gone on, a bit of what had gone on. And she said, "Oh, we always thought he was a bit queer." You know, as if it was the most normal thing in the world.
And actually they'd been abusing you and you'd had to go up. Isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, I look at what you went through and what you learned in that time, and then what that has armed you with to become the success that you are today. What would you distill that down as?
Yeah, you can see how the dots fit together, can't you, when you read the book? I guess I left school and I didn't have the imagination educated out of me, which is what we do to our kids. And hopefully education is changing and that's going to change. And then I had a time in the television business selling television rights around the world. So I learned international business and contracts. And I was very lucky because I had the creative sort of gene and the business gene. And I ended up being good at both of them, or some of the time I was anyway. And people say to me, you know, I've got these ideas, but I can't do the money and all of that. And I always go, we live in an amazing age where you can learn anything. I mean, look at you.
Exactly. Look at us and what we're trying to do. But it's watching that correlation from, so you leave school at 16, not really sure what you're going to do, start doing bits and pieces, and then end up working in the world of theatre, applying to be an assistant stage manager.
That's right.
And all that brings with it, for the little that you were earning, but the magic and the creativity and the energy of the people you were around.
Yeah, I went from, you know, having sort of had a really hard time, even being in prison for a short period of time when I was 17, to coming out and getting a job through the stage newspaper, would you believe? And it's madness, really.
We're just comparing notes, because I similarly got my first break in telly through that.
It's not around anymore,
No.
is it? Thank you very much, the stage for both of us. And getting a job in the Little Theatre Club in the very early days of theatre, of fringe theatre in the West End, and going on to Richmond Theatre, and suddenly knowing my stage left from my stage right, and my upstage and my downstage, and rock and roll coming along, and wanting to have big shows, and sort of getting involved in that, and going on the road as a roadie, really. Not what my mum and dad had planned, not my father, the brigadier, had quite planned for me, and sort of everything sort of went on from there.
Yeah. You touched on your time inside in prison. I love the little anecdote you tell about meeting Jeffrey Archer at a cocktail party.
Yeah, I did years later. Well, he was in North Sea Camp, which was the detention centre that I was in for 8 weeks. And I really couldn't say, he's slightly intimidating. He's a rather nice guy now, but he's rather slightly intimidating guy. And I said, I couldn't think of what to say to him. So I said, you and I have something in common. And he looked down over his little pince-nez glasses and he said, what would that be? And I said, I was in North Sea Camp. And there was this very long silence. And he's, to his credit, he said, not a lot of people say that to me at cocktail parties.
It was a great way of breaking the ice.
Yeah.
I think that there's the thing that comes across as well. I love how you described it. You still had your imagination when you left school, and there was a confidence. There was a sort of naivety and a belief that you could do anything you turned your hand to. You saw something you liked the idea of. You weren't afraid to go and try it and give it a go.
I suppose so, yes. I suppose that is, you're taught in school, aren't you, that you've got to get the qualifications and you've got to get on that ladder, and otherwise things are going to go terribly wrong. And my sort of belief was almost as if one of my attributes was ignorance of the things that could go wrong. And I kind of thought, if you do something, it's got a chance of working out. So that's what I think happened.
The enthusiasm for optimism, I think, is so fundamental in a lot of what we do, because there's a lot of things that can go wrong and you can get caught up with that. There's a brilliant moment in the book where you describe you used to set yourself the challenge of failing a number of times a day because you understood that success and growth comes through failure. I thought that was a really interesting sort of idea of going, right, today I'm going to fail 5 times at something.
If you can make a game of life, and make it into that. And I used to say I'd punch the air when I had 3 failures in the bag, knowing that only through being willing to sort of strengthen that muscle. And Richard Branson calls it, you've got to, when you fall over, you've got to dust yourself off and get on with it, and realize that everybody's not looking at you. It's only you that's looking at you. Most of the others are looking at themselves and what's going on for them. And so you can get away with anything, really, in that respect.
So let's talk about how you came to create Yo. It was a bit of a light bulb moment. You were having lunch with someone that sort of you looked up to enormously, weren't you?
Yeah, I mean, I'd actually gone off to live in Chamonix in the Alps, and I thought I had a Vauxhall Astra inherited from my dear old dad, and I was going to live a simple life, living in the Alps and going climbing. That was my sort of big thing. And I was down there and I thought, no, I've got something in me. There was a sort of kernel in my oyster that needed really to do something. And I came back, and I remember that was another one I set myself as a game, a task. I'm going to call up all the people I'm most scared of. And there was quite a few of them. I don't think I mentioned it in the book. There's Harvey Goldsmith, the big promoter. He was one of them. And he's, how are you doing, Simon? And he was kind of a scary character. And suddenly I thought, well, maybe people don't have such a bad view of me in the world, which I sort of thought about at the time. And the other was a guy called Uehara-san, Mr. Uehara, who was actually a pop star in Japan years and years ago. And he had a TV show in Japan, which I'd worked with him on, called Hit Studio Deluxe. Not a lot of people know that. It was sort of, American bandstand, top of the pops of Japan. And he took me out very nice to me, he took me out to lunch at a restaurant in Berkeley Square, and we sat having sushi. And I'd loved sushi from being in LA in the old days of rock and roll. And he said, I said, what about sushi? It's, things that happen in America come over to England 5 years later, a bit shorter these days. And he said, what you should do, Simon, is a conveyor belt sushi bar. And this was pre-internet. And in that moment, I imagined the train set on going around the dining room table with the marmalade on it, and I sort of went away and researched it, and very expensive phone calls later, and ended up in Japan and found out there were 2,500 of these things in Japan, and they'd been going since 1960s, and we'd never heard of them, And I thought any moment there's going to be a sort of Terence Conran or a Gordon Ramsay, the grown-ups coming around the corner, and I'd better get a move on. That was what happened.
Of course, you take a concept like that, which pre-internet, pre-travel, when Japan seemed like a long, long way away.
Great mystery of the East.
Real mystery. And you bring it back to London, trying to explain the idea, trying to sell the idea to people must have been quite the challenge. I mean, a challenge that I'm sure you enjoyed, but quite the challenge to get people to sort of buy into what it could be.
Well, you talked about enthusiasm earlier, and I think I really believed it. I could imagine what this would like. In Japan, they were sort of cheap, like a happy eater on the side of the A1, at a cafe. And I could imagine this being a big event. And I wanted to have a big site, which I did eventually get in Soho. And that was the key to it. And I think that people believe me. And if you can convince yourself, and I have this thing about, you've got to take a research period. 3 months is nearly 100 days. If you chip off 1% a day, you get. And I really believed that it was going to be a big deal. And I think when I spoke to people, I didn't hide behind my business plan. My business plan actually said on the front of it, says, if you want to make God laugh, show him your business plan. And they said, you can't show that to the bank. And the bank said, well, actually, it's very realistic. We quite like it. And I really believed it. And so I could talk to people about it. And the couple was, one was the manager at NatWest Bank who gave me a loan to add to the little bit of cash that I had. And the other was the Jewish owner of the Manny Davidson, who gave me my first site in the West End and believed in it and said, well, we're going to give him a go because this could be big, boy. This could be big, boys. And meet this guy, Simon.
Amazing. How many people do you think you pitched it to who said it's never going to work before you found the ones that believed in it?
I mean, I talked to a lot of naysayers. Everybody had a reason why it wouldn't work. People are going to, they're going to steal things off the conveyor belt. They're going to think what happens if a conveyor belt breaks down, And one of the things that I've learned is that you want to listen to everybody, even the people I call the C word, the consultants. You don't want to listen to everybody, but you're allowed to filter what comes in, what you take in, what you put to one side, and what you actually use. And so I listened to all those people, but I had a confidence. I had a sort of, it was, probably a bit of a delusion at one point, but I did believe it myself, and that's what makes the difference.
So you've managed to get the money together. You found a location on Poland Street, where the original Yo Sushi
which
was.
You came to, I believe.
Which I did come to,
in the early days.
After it had opened. And I walked past on a number of occasions, far too scared to go in, because I had no idea what it was. Like this concept, it was which was the point. And it's interesting, once we get to the launch of the business, the struggle you had to get people through the door, because everybody's like, what on earth is that place? Can the public go in there? Is there robots selling drinks? It was like some crazy dream. Really. But were there moments before you got to the point where the doors open where you thought, I've bitten off more than I can chew here?
Well, I had everything on the line, which I think if you're doing a startup and you're asking other people, and I was asking other people to invest at that thing, I ended up not needing them. But I was asking people, you've got to have everything that you've got in the world. You've got to hurt more than they're going to hurt. And so in that, I was going to open at the end of 1 year. And I got the rug pulled from underneath me at the end of the first year, and I opened in the end of the second year, which is when all the things happen, the conveyor, the robots, the whole bit. And I believed it, I think, for 90% of the time, and 5% was quite a bit of doubt, and 5% was nights of, nightmares and sheer terror. And how could you even think that you could do something like this? But I recovered each time, and I just kept on, and it happened.
I mean, there is that moment as well, though, in the book, and you talk about it. And I can remember thinking, while you're telling me this story, that that's it, right? Where you've got the Poland Street location, everything's sorted, and then suddenly the building gets sold to some new owners.
That's right.
And you're like, hold on. And it's like, well, we can't have that location now. After all that work and all that time, the perfect spot, you knew exactly where it was.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, the people that are going to give you the space, they've sold it to somebody else. And now you've got a whole, when then you're thinking, well, we need another location. Then I think you decided, no, I'm going to find the new owners, which was never as easy. These days, you just look it up. It'd be super easy. I've got to find these new owners. I've got to persuade them that this is a good idea.
That's exactly what happened. Yeah, that's exactly right. I call them showstoppers. And you know what it is. You're doing something new. And there's always somebody who comes along. You know, we had the health and safety people. You can't have food going around on a conveyor. The fire people saying you can't have open kitchens with, you know, and all of that business. And they were showstoppers. And I always say you have to go round stone walls. And I love the idea, the sort of mental image of build golden bridges that people can walk over to. So you just keep on going and you just pretend that hasn't happened. And it's unbelievable if you do keep going. I mean, look, you've got to never be late to quit and cut bait is one of the things, you know, if you want, when you get out, and I have got out of things in my time and lost lots of money doing it. But if you believe it, keep going because it will happen.
Now, Joel and I are loving building our skincare brand together. It's exciting, it's messy, and of course, every single detail matters. That's why the Galaxy S26 Ultra Enterprise Edition has basically become part of the team. We are constantly shooting product ideas, bottles, textures, labels, finishes, and with the 200 megapixel and 5 times telephoto camera, everything, and I mean everything, comes out insanely sharp. So when we get home and start comparing options, we can actually see what things look like. No guesswork, just clean, professional images, exactly what you want when you're selling skincare. It captures even more light, so the colours stay true and everything looks incredibly polished. Editing is just as easy. With the AI-powered Pro Visual Engine and Photo Assist, we can remove distractions, tweak shots, or refine content just by typing a prompt, so no late nights and no stress. And how about all the unglamorous stuff? Well, the intelligent document scanner keeps invoices, deliveries, and receipts organised. Basically, it's a phone that helps you run a business while you're building one. Get business ready with the Samsung Galaxy S26 Ultra Enterprise Edition, including a 3-year warranty and next business day doorstep exchange. So talk to me about that moment when you finally, because you kept it all a secret, you kept the walls, the front window hidden, you kept everything hidden. When you finally unveil it and you open the restaurant, what's that moment like when this dream and this crazy idea has become a reality?
Well, I sort of, you know, we had these robots. So just 2 weeks before we opened, I'd got these robots. I've got Brilliant Stages, who are a company who do the big rock shows. And they delivered these robotic drinks trolleys, which drove around the restaurant. They had a voice on them. My voice, actually, I recorded to save money on an actor. And one of them was an American voice. My voice, American, said, as this one drove around the corner after it was delivered, it said, "Move your fat ass. Somebody's got a freaking job to do in this room." It said, job, I think it said, actually. And the American tourists were going, "Did you hear what it said to me, Joel?" You know, I mean, people couldn't believe it. But that moment when it opened, really people didn't come. And I don't think I tell the story in the book, but I even got one of those things on Oxford Street with a thing saying "Sushi this way." I was that desperate.
Board, like I
actually did that, yeah. And anyway, it didn't. And we got to the second Saturday and I was having sleepless nights, you know. And then the second Saturday, I was downstairs trying to keep myself busy. I hope people are going to come here in the office. And Bruce Isaacs, who's the opening manager, came down. He beckoned to me like this and he said, "Come up." And we came up and there was a queue down the block. And it was like the relief was enormous because it was pre-internet. There was no Facebook or anything like that.
No Instagram to tell people, yeah.
So exactly. But word of mouth had gone out. And whether it's word of mouth on Instagram or word of mouth, the real old-fashioned word of mouth,
yeah, it
had gone out. And people said, "You've got to go and see this." And they all came and all the pop stars came and everybody was in there. And Jonathan Ross was in every day on his little Union Jack scooter. And you know, it was a scene. It was a real scene. And we had that queue for 5 years and everybody was in there. But everybody was equal. You know, you got the MTV kids sitting next to the skateboarders, sitting next to the ladies who lunch, sitting next to the business guys in the suits and the media crowd like yourself, you know, coming in. And it was a scene and everybody was kind of equal and laughing about the fact they were eating off a conveyor belt and, you know, it's like being in a factory.
And robots serving you drinks.
That's right.
That would tell you to move your fat ass.
Yes, exactly.
Because I've got a job to do.
Exactly.
do you look back and think, and I know that we learn through our failings, but there are moments along the way you thought that was a big mistake and we shouldn't have done it like that, or if I could go back, I would have done that differently.
I don't have. I mean, we did make a lot of mistakes. We opened in some really stupid places. I thought if we opened anywhere, we'd be so successful in that backwater in Soho. I thought we could open off-site, get cheap sites, all of that. We went up to Edinburgh, which is miles away, and opened in a completely wrong place, and that put us back 2 years, and we lost a lot of money. So there were lots of practical mistakes like that. But generally, I think I was very lucky because the timing was just right. Pret had just had their second restaurant, their second Pret a Manger open. They'd started selling sushi as a sort of small bit. There was this. It had always been very Japanesey. There was something kind of quite sexy about it, you know. The timing was exactly right. So that bit was lucky. But I think I made it showbiz, and that's what made it work. And I didn't think of it as a restaurant. You know, people come and pitch me today, and they go, oh, "I've got this great idea. It's going to be chicken, but the sauce is really fantastic." And I'm going, "It doesn't really matter about the sauce. I mean, the sauce has got to be good. It's got to be great, great, great. Everything's got to be great about so much competition these days. But you've got to have what I used to call in show business. They used to say there's a zizz in showbiz. It's quite sort of sickening, really. But,
but you're right.
They're right, and there's a zizz in everything, and I think the kids are learning that now, that everybody's looking for that zizz.
I think you described yourself at some point as having chutzpah, and there's a couple of brilliant bits of marketing that you did, where basically on the menus you put your sponsors down. I think as the airline,
Sony, Honda, and All Nippon Airlines, who didn't give me very much.
No,
but I put them over everything. It was just an instinctive thing to do.
And was it Honda that you basically contacted Honda and said, I'd like to put you on the menus, and as long as they didn't say no, which they didn't say no.
I didn't even tell them that I was going to put them on the menu. I said, I want to make you they lent me one of those Honda Gyro canopies, and we ended up with...
It was like a three-wheeler.
Three-wheeler. We ended up with 10 of them running around. Yeah, it was like a tuk-tuk thing. And... I wrote to them and I said, "Dear Honda Motorcycles UK, I'm so grateful for you for lending me this thing. I'm going to make you my official sponsor. If I don't hear back from you in the next 7 days, I'll assume you agree." Of course, a big company never wrote back to me. And I did that to all of them. So I had them over everything. And people were going around, "Have you seen who's backing him? I mean, how did he pull that off? They just lent me this bike."
And that's the brilliance, though, because you had a bit of a cash flow problem.
Yeah.
And then you went to your supplier and you said, "Can you just explain how you got that funding?"
It was a funny thing. I said,
again is someone's like the balls of somebody to go and speak to the supplier and say, "I tell you what, why don't you lend me the money I owe you?"
That's exactly what I said to them. Yeah, and the guy just laughed, and he said, "We said I'll ask them if I'll give you some extended credit." And he said that the guy who owned the company, it was actually the people who'd put all the conveyors and everything in there. He said, so the guy, he was a hard nut. He wasn't going to give anything away to anybody. And he said, "Lads," he said, "they're going to do loads of these places. I want you to be in on all of it." And he said, "It's safe as houses, the money, because who's backing them, don't you? Sony, Honda, and All Nippon Airlines." And I hadn't planned any of it. It's just kind of the way it worked out.
It's amazing, isn't it? The blag of that lent to their confidence.
Yes.
Which set everything up and allowed you to succeed.
It's what you could call a confidence trick in the very best meaning of that word.
So how did you go about crafting a brand that was so bold, so different, and also, and this I think is crucial, ultimately so recognizable?
Well, I didn't get an advertising agency in, and we didn't sit down and plan 10 years of how we were going to develop a brand. But I went to a guy called, who would give it a lot of credit really, with Yo. I had a list of all these different names: Sushi, Circus, this, that, and the other. And Yo Sushi was a girl who used to come in my office and she used to go, "Yo," And I thought it sounded good. And everybody said, "What a stupid name." But Mark Norton, who's actually the only guy ever to have done 2 Rolling Stones album covers, because they're so, apart from Andy Warhol, I think, did too, they're so demanding as character. And he did as an album cover designer graphics, and he actually, and the other guy called Graham Sturt, and they actually designed it. And we walked in one day, pre kind of computers, and they'd had it all on this board, and it was rather like you see the logo now, and it was a beautifully done logo, but they set it against a neon lit Tokyo background. And what we showed it to people said, that's great. And so we showed it to some Japanese people, and they said, oh no. And it turned out it was the red light district in Tokyo. So we had no idea.
Which these days is really cool, right?
If it suppose it would have been.
Everyone would go, that's really sexy and cool. Back
but in those days, it was a very no.
seedy, bad.
Seedy, yeah. So anyway, that he did it. And he said Yo was always destined to be a brand in all sorts of things like Virgin, I suppose he meant, and just happened to be a sushi bar in its first manifestation. In those days, Virgin was going into lots of things, lots of which didn't work, but some of which did, obviously. And there was Easy, and the Easy was going into hotels and rental cars and, the same thing. And I thought, well, there's nobody else doing it, but Yo could be the third one. And I've done in the hotels, I've had a fashion brand. It hasn't gone as far as I thought. I started pretty late in life. I was 47.
For a bit.
Yeah, well, exactly.
Below.
Yeah, that is true. I had a few things, but and I think it still could go on to do lots more. But it's interesting that there weren't so many people trying to use the same name, because conventional thinking was you don't want to do something else because it might not be as good as the first one, and then it would bring the other one down. That was the old-fashioned thinking.
What do you think it is about Yo then that means it can cut across age, class, and culture? I mean, it was such a cool scene at the start, but it didn't mean that the public could come in as well, and they felt like they got something really exciting.
Well, I think it's a very good word. Of course, it rhymes with lots of things: yo to go, yo below, whatever it was, and it had a lot of what those modern brands later did, which is it's cheeky and it was radical and it changed things and all of that. But I think the thing that I wanted it to be, and when I look back, it was innovative. Whatever it went into, it really tried to do something radically different. And I'd never been in restaurants in my life. So people used to say, oh, we don't do things like that in the restaurant business. And I say, well, we're doing it now because we're going to do it my way. It was a bit so... Steve Jobs had this thing of it's my way or the highway, and I want it done by 5 o'clock and I want it done now. And I think that was me at that time, as I think megalomaniac control of something at the very beginning, at the outset, is absolutely the way to do it. But to hand it over, as I did, to Robin Rowland eventually, to actually expand it out, it was the other thing that I did, which was clever, was not to kind of hang on to my baby. I went off to do the next one.
This episode is sponsored by YOTELS, the intelligent financial platform for global businesses. Every great idea starts with a person, a spark of imagination, and a belief that things can be different. YOTELS helps turn your idea into a global business with its financial operating system built for the AI era. With YOTELS, you can be global from day one, accept payments in over 180 countries, open multi-currency accounts instantly, transfer money at market-leading FX rates, and issue cards for your team. All from one AI-native platform built to scale. With real-time, borderless, intelligent finance, YOTELS helps make your ideas happen. Join thousands of businesses growing globally at airwallets.com. YOTELS, intelligent global finance. T's and C's apply. Your monies are safeguarded, not FSCS protected. See airwallets.com for more details. Simon, Yo Sushi to YOTELS, that's a pretty wild leap. How did you go from one to the other?
Well, it isn't. I mean, I handed the business to Robin. In fact, I think Robin said, look, you're really good. I could never have opened Yo Sushi, but, it needs somebody like me to take it on to the next part. And I said, I don't think he said, he might have even said, you change your mind all the time. And if you don't kind of stop it and let me have a go at it, I might leave. I think he might have said something along those lines. And so I said, well, you go for it. And they went, oh, you'll never let go. You're too much of a control freak. And I absolutely did. And I thought, I'll show you. And I did. And it wobbled at the beginning. And then he took it on and sort of built it out, really. And I went and locked my door. And I had an office next door and got my pad of paper out because I draw. And I started drawing up what a hotel would look like. And I got hooked on it. So I used that as a bit like sort of, getting yourself off drugs. I sort of got got myself going cold turkey, and I got myself a new girlfriend, and the new girlfriend was YOTEL, and I started developing that. And we actually, the first thing I did, and I'm a big believer in prototyping things, and we built a polystyrene model in our car park and put it up. And people, my friends were walking and going, "This is amazing. This is amazing." If I'd done research on that, saying, "Would you like to sleep in a 7 square meter room with no natural light?" People are not going to walk in. But when they walked in there, they went, "This is so obvious. Why didn't somebody do this before?"
Yeah, if you build it, they will come. Because I think
that's the word.
when you were, before you sort of your design business, when you were designing sets and stages, some of those sets that you built for some of those rock bands, Ozzy Osbourne and the people you were looking after, they would buy the sets that you'd made off.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a great way of creating the vision that you were trying to sell them in with.
That's right. Yeah, it was before computer graphics.
Yeah.
So we started off with airbrush sort of paintings, which were rather beautiful things. And everybody wanted, pop stars wanted to, they had the gold disc in the hall and then the picture of the stage show. And then we started doing 3-dimensional models, and we built some amazing ones. I remember we were doing one for AC/DC, and they had a big bell that came down, and the bell came down and it rang on the model. And in what we did one for Queen, actually, and when you pressed the button on the side of it, came in a great big flight case, and you opened it, and it was just a model of this great stage. You pressed the button and it sang "We Are the Champions," and you can imagine but Freddie was going, "Oh, I want that at home."
Yeah, of course. I did love the story. I'm sort of digressing, but I did love the story about the rake on the stage. And one of the stars you built the rake for absolutely loved it, but didn't Freddie turn around? You'd built one for Queen.
I didn't build it. So somebody else built one for. No, I built a very rake stage for Robert Plant after he left Led Zeppelin. They had all the backstage areas underneath the stage, and as he moved up and down this very steeply raked stage, of course, in the stadiums it looked amazing because it looked like he was going up and down. And somebody did one for John McGraw in Los Angeles. Did one for Freddie Mercury, and Freddie came in on the first day, and he walked up and down it a few times. He said, "What do you think I am, a mountain goat?"
You can take it away. Imagine doing that, can't you? Now, I think one of the things that I think it's really, really pertinent to this is how fast culture and trends move. I mean, Yo Sushi was a very trendy concept. I mean, it was ahead of that in many ways. YOTEL, all of these things. How do you manage to stay ahead of that shift in where people's interests and excitement is and their tastes go in order to keep it relevant, keep it trendy, to keep it sort of viable?
Well, it's a very good point. I mean, YOTEL have done it very well. They're continually innovating and doing new hotels because they're building new hotels. What Yo Sushi did was to go into the supermarkets, and I think there's 400 outlets in supermarkets with our own people in there. So they've done it in their way. I wanted them, and I wanted them to reinvent automation, because vending, for example, has got such a bad rap. Nobody likes it. But if you could reinvent that, with all the problems of wages and people and all of that, if you could reinvent that and make it really exciting for people, everybody'd want to go. And Yo's perfectly positioned to do that, but to date they haven't done that. So maybe somebody listening will do their thing. My line was CANI, CANI ? Constant and never-ending innovation or improvement. And so you've got to constantly innovate, and you've got to, what Sainsbury's used to call, delight the customer with new things. And I think once you get to be a bigger business and more corporate, much, much harder for those people to do that.
There was an important essence of Yo and all of the Yo brands across all the sectors that has to keep what it is at its heart. How do you hold on to that? How do you make sure that if you're going to expand into hospitality in a different way, that it's still the Yo that we love from the original concept that was on Polish Street, that is, whether it's in Sainsbury's, whether it's in hotels?
While I was at the helm, I suppose it was me and my personality and what I was going to do next, and I'd always be surprising people. As soon as you get into a bigger company, they try and work it out and they try and analyze it. And, there's this thing of, you get the new idea and you put it up on the whiteboard, and then as soon as it goes on the whiteboard, there's a million reasons why it shouldn't come down. Whiteboards. The one whiteboard didn't work is that Tim Bevan at Working Title told me that when he called me one day and said, "We're doing this film for Rowan Atkinson called Johnny English, and can we put the conveyor belt in it, and the story is going to be that he gets his tie caught in the conveyor belt and dragged around. And he said, and the way that we actually do those reenactments in films is we think of all the skits first, and then we put the story together once we've got them.
So they think about the set pieces and then
put it together as a story. And he said, we had a great big thing, and we were always taking these set pieces down. But he said the tie caught in the conveyor belt at Sushi never got taken down. That was the one. I was rather proud.
Quite right. Yeah, and then it goes into that film, which is a film that's watched globally.
All over the world, exactly. We had that, and actually before that, Microsoft. I got a call from Microsoft saying, this is Wyden and Kennedy out of Portland, Oregon. We want to make a TV commercial about you and Sushi. And I went, okay, who's winding me up here? And then it really was them. And I remember turning to people in the office and saying, we're going to have to get rid of the Apple Macs, which we never did, actually. but and that went out all over the world. They spent $39 million, they told me, on airtime, publicizing us with me in it and the name and everything. And
off the back of Microsoft's advertising
why?
campaign.
Because I'd done great marketing. I didn't know any marketing people. I spent the money on trying to do something interesting, and it got noticed.
The book opens with a really lovely story where you've sold Sushi.
A part of it.
Part of it. You've sold it, and you go to your cash point. And you've described to us that you had, I think you had £200,000 in a flat that you were living in, and you were willing to put all of that into what you had. And then suddenly you go to the cash point after that sale. 5-6
years later, yeah.
Just tell that story, Simon.
I went to the cash point, and the lawyers had turned into nice people, and I pulled my checkbook out and gave them the sort code, and the guy said the money's going to be in your bank in 20 minutes. So I thought I'll have a look as I walked past my local cash point, and it came up on the screen, this sum of money, sort of small millions, and it was like, it really was a moment. And I was so long looking at it that the queue formed behind me, and there's this bloke behind me, and he says, excuse me, mate, you're nearly finished? And I turned around to him and I said, excuse me, mate. I said, cop a look at this. And, I think I put in the book, I said, if anybody tells you that money doesn't make you happy, they're lying.
There is a moment, but that moment, the visual representation of the millions that you had been paid for a portion of what you'd created, with everything that you'd been through, the trials, the tribulations, the successes, the failures, and all that sort of stuff. How does that feel?
It was relief, really. It was relief. I've never got out of bed to go and really make millions of quid. I've got out of bed because I got excited about an idea, and I've definitely got out of bed so that I'm not poor. But that's been the driver. But when that sort of money comes in, and it means, for somebody like me, it's great because it means that I can have an idea and go out and get it started. And of course, once you do, the thing that people say when they make some money like that is, hanging on to it's the hard bit. And I was deep in the mud of that, because I was, as soon as I had an idea, that's where I wanted to spend it. I did have a Ferrari and I did have a Porsche, but I didn't really want those. What I wanted to do is spend it on what the next idea was, and so build the thing out.
So you always have that confidence. That's interesting, isn't it? Because when you've created something that is so spectacularly successful, I don't know whether there's fear that you can't do it again in the back of your mind, or was it always...
Yeah. I mean, Dragon's Den, I always used to say to the others on Dragon's Den, you all think you're serial entrepreneurs, but, every time you start the next thing, certainly in a new sector, you're a startup. You don't know that thing's going to work. And I think you've got some money to back you up. It does help. But I think most people agreed. And yes, every time I don't put my ability to go out to a restaurant and have a meal and pay my way on the line anymore. But I did at the outset, and I think that's the difference.
So for me and Joel, Foreskin is all about simplicity and confidence. I wonder what advice you might give us about carving out a distinctive identity in what is a really competitive market.
I think you're absolutely spot on. I mean, there's a famous story I always tell that I bought a pair of shoes in Harvey Nichols, which were bright yellow in a sale. And I walked down Knightsbridge, and this beautiful blonde girl kind of looks me up and down and gives me a great big smile. So men haven't learnt how to dress up. And it's not just skincare, and it is. I use that stuff, but it's not that. It's just how to dress well. And I think if it was me doing what you're doing, I would go further and I'd say how to be the best version of yourself, how to get up in the morning. Because if you walk into a room and you walk in with confidence, even if you're sort of what I call acting as if you present yourself, if you're looking good, if you're feeling good, and women always say that they say we dress up not to look good or sexy or whatever, because we feel good as ourselves. And if you feel good, today I've got a nice suit on, and I like to dress up, and I look in the mirror, and a bit of vanity, and people take you seriously. So actually what you're selling is self-confidence, and you're selling an image that might not be you at the beginning, but you can become that person.
Yeah, I like that idea that you're selling self-confidence. I think that's a really simple concept for people to latch onto, isn't it? That makes a big difference.
And you hear a lot of guys talking about that. If you do sort of talk deeply and intimately with other men, young boys growing up, that is to just how do you get confidence? It's like if it's a sunny day and you've got the sun on your back, you can't imagine a winter's day, and vice versa. And it's the same with confidence. You can't. I'm sitting here talking to you confidently. I wasn't always confident. I was. I struggled at times, but I think you have to kind of act the part, and then you become the person, and bit by bit, with a few failures, you build that up. And that's what I hope. I mean, what I do really hope for our next generation is that we can actually liberate schools to educate the children the way they want to, not the way the government wants you to, so that you have a choice about where you go to school, and the head teacher can decide what they're going to teach for their community. And to have a 30-year plan for schools where we teach reading, writing, arithmetic, because all the rest will be instant. And the rest of the time, it's about character development, teaching people to do difficult things. When I was at school, I went rock climbing, and I really learnt, I learnt to deal with fear. And I think that is the thing, is to teach character.
Simon, what do you think for the future for you, though? What is there still for you to achieve out there? Or are you happy just to sort of navigate the rest of your business life and personal life in a way that means that you can enjoy the experience without sort of forcing yourself to get out there and do more stuff? You still as hungry and ambitious?
I'm not as hungry for money. No, I'm not. And not even for doing new brands as they grow. And I'm always looking for people who are going to take Yo on and do new brand stuff with them. Anybody out there wants to do a Yo brand, I'm your man. But I'm thoroughly enjoying doing what I'm doing with you, which is talking about the future of the world and trying to encourage and inspire people to do that and pass on some of what I've learnt. And I'm going to carry on doing all of that. And if I ever finish on a heavy note, if I ever get a terminal disease, I'm pretty determined to die well. Because that's something that most people are scared of. And the thing is to see if you can do it really, really well. I mean, after all, I don't want to be a spoiler on the book, but we're lucky sperms. We were the one that got a chance at life. If you hadn't got there first, it wouldn't be you.
Yeah.
And so that's, for me, that's good enough for the meaning of the whole thing.
That feels like the sort of end line that Joel would have absolutely loved. We are lucky sperms.
Yeah.
Anybody that listens to the podcast, Joel will be thrilled with that. Simon, it's been a real pleasure to chat with you. Thank you so much for taking some time to share some wisdom with us as well. And your book is such a fascinating read. The audiobook, which I had an advanced copy of, is even more engaging because it's you.
And it's just
telling me the story.
about to come out here. Yo Man
is the book. I think you're going to stick around as well to go on our Patreon, share a bit more insight and wisdom, which would be amazing for our Patreon contributors. Thank you, Simon, for joining me today. More insights from Simon over on Patreon. It's totally free to join, as you know, patreon.co.uk/thebusinessmen. I'm going to be back next week. Thanks for listening.